How do? JR here. For those of you who have watched the Carrack unboxing video, this is the next part, how to prep your parts. If you haven't watched the Carrack unboxing video, go and do that right now, then come back. I'll wait. You back? Good, right. Cool, so things you need to prep 3D parts. A lot of you guys and girls have done models before, maybe the Warhammer models, FX models, all that kind of stuff. They tend to be injection plastic or injection resin. 3D print stuff is slightly different. So even if you've done models before, this is probably a video that's worth watching just so you can see the difference between how to prep a 3D printed part compared to an injection part. The differences aren't staggering. It's about quantity over size. So let me give you an example of that. We'll do this one. So with a 3D printed part, we supply all of our parts still on their bases. There's a couple of reasons for this. One, we need to be able to pack these parts relatively quickly. If we had to pack 60 odd individual tiny little parts, the foam would need to be bigger to have more little pockets, and it would take us longer to do it. Time is money, so we'd have to charge more for the kits. Also, it does make our life a lot easier for stock keeping, and also for you guys, because these will hold these together much better temporarily. The biggest difference between an injection molded part and a 3D printed part is that an injection molded part, where the plastic on the sprue joins to the model, that actual connection is what the material has been pushed through in the mold. With a 3D print, there are a lot more of these touch points. A lot of people who have never seen these before will pick them up and go, oh my goodness, there's so many supports to remove. But these supports are only there to hold the piece in place in the 3D printer. It's not what the material is pushed through, so they are absolutely tiny. They range from 0.5 to all the way down to 0.25 of a millimeter, so they're very easy to come off. You can snap them off, but I think certainly if you've not had any experience taking parts off a 3D print, I would suggest using tools to do so. So the two tools that we will want to use is a sharp knife, a scalpel preferably, new blade if you've got one, and some flush cutters. Again, in both cases, sharper the better, obviously being very careful with sharp tools. So with these sprues in the Tough 2000, which is the darker grey resin, when you've got more than one component on one of these prints, it's good to be a bit methodical with it. Start at one end, work towards the other. You may find, especially on these tiny little pieces like these turrets, that once we've taken a couple of these off, we'll actually cut away some of the platform just so we get easier access into these ones. So the vast majority, because these are a small part, the vast majority of the touch points are the very small ones, so they will just come off really nicely with a knife. So we're going to start at this end and just work our way around. You're just literally using the blade of the knife to break the point of contact between the support and the model. So with these ones, it's just very methodical. Just go around using your knife. X-Acto knives are good for this. I tend to use a scalpel just because it's got a really easily removable blade. And then, so we've taken all those ones off that side. We'll get our flush cutters in. Don't be afraid when you're using these flush cutters. Sometimes you'll cut through it and the piece will literally just ping off. That's it just been removed from its supports, just quicker than you were expecting. But just be aware that can happen. So we're going to work our way around this. Go back in with the scalpel. As I say, there are so many supports on some of these smaller pieces. Just move away. So you can sort of pull out these sort of big blobs of support so that you can get to the other side to see the other ones. And then just very carefully take off those last ones, and there we go. So that's the turret off. We're not going to clean up the touch points. The closer we got the knife, the less of a tiny little spot there'll be, but we'll put these on a pile and we'll go through all of those at once. So I'll put that to one side and then move on to the next one. So first thing I'm going to do is just take my flush cutters and get rid of all the rest of the supports from the last one. So another option you have with this is, if you fancy it, take your flush cutters and actually cut off all of the supports at the bottom from the base. And that leaves you with this, which is the component with all its supports on. Now, that can, depending on the piece, can be a lot easier, because now you see we've got access to all of these bits at the bottom. So we can just go around the bottom with our knife. Just, again, taking each one off individually. I say you can rip these off. The only disadvantage of ripping them off is that you do risk leaving a bigger quantity of them than you would like. A little bit of that. So we've left a bit of that one on there. There we go. We'll get that rest of that in the cleanup. So you can see, because we ripped that bit off the last, we just left slightly larger points. These will sand off so quickly you won't believe. So that's cool. So that's another one. And now I'm just going to cut that off. Ding! Literally just hit a flower pot on the side of the room. And again, it's just so you can get into that. You don't need to do that. But I say, so this isn't too bad because all of these turrets are about the same sort of size. Some of the other prints, especially the one with the ramps and the masts on, they're very close together on the print because there's a lot of very small pieces. And you'll find yourself going, it's a little bit of a challenge just to work out what order to do them in. But again, be methodical, take your time. I mean, this is one of those things. So we see, we just gone through that, and that's actually pretty much released that completely off. Look. There you go. That one was easy. So this Tough 2000 resin is quite similar to ABS plastic. It can take some punishment. It really can. It's great for these small parts. The surface quality is not as good as the model resin that we use for the larger parts, which is why we don't use this resin for everything. But for these little delicate bits like turrets and guns and ramps and cylinders and all that kind of stuff, it's absolutely ideal. It is, however, slightly harder to take off its supports because it is so strong. It has a lot of elastic strength. Because it's less brittle, if this was made from the model resin, you'd probably be able to tweak them off because the actual touch points themselves are brittle. But obviously having those sort of brittle properties are not great when we want to have these really small gun details because they'll also be brittle. So there we go. Right, so just the last pair to go. These are a lot smaller because these are the ones that are retracted into the side. So again, just make your way around as best as you can see. So be exceedingly careful with your own fingers and other appendages while using little knives like this. I'm just going to, again, just remove the actual supports from the base. And sometimes that sort of shock of them coming off will take the touch points off. There we go. So these are much stubbier because they sort of go all the way into the side wings of the Carrack. So they're nicely tucked away when they're not deployed because the actual sort of pod goes all the way into the body so you can get into the turret. And that's it. So that's that one. Moving on. Okay, so this is one of the larger pieces. These are a different challenge. So these are printed in the printer upside down. So all of these supports have to sort of go from the base all the way down. There's a lot of supports on the inside as well. What we're always trying to do is put the supports in the least egregious places as we can. So in something like this, we don't want any touch points on any of these hero faces, bottom or top. So we try to sneak them in on the underneaths of things, and obviously we have to have a lot at the bottom. So what we need to do with these larger pieces with lots and lots and lots of touch points is just be aware of the fact that there are big touch points on the inside and then slight touch points on the outside. There are more touch points than we can initially see. Towards the bottom, we have lots and lots and lots and lots of small touch points. The idea of this is that we get a really nice even support across a big supporting face because that supporting face has to hold the weight in the printer of the whole part. So we put lots and lots and lots of very small points on. So they should still be pretty easy to remove and to clean and sand and everything, but they're giving a lot of support to the model while it's printing, which is keeping it nice and stable so we get a nice surface finish. So in this case, this is the front fuselage of the Carrack.
I'm going to start by taking out some of these little extra ones. So there's a few in the hanger here that go actually from the model to the model. This is called internal supports. It's just one of those necessities that we've had to do on this model. So we'll start with those just to get them out of the way. Again, just going in with the scalpel, just trying to just cut the touch point as close to the model as possible. So we're leaving as small amount of plastic left in. Let's just use the flush cutters for that one because it's a little bit bigger. There we go. There we go. So that's that off. So there's a few little touch points that we'll need to get the sandpaper in to clean up, but that's not too bad. Same on the underneath. We've got all these bits in the vehicle bay and these ones here. So we'll just where the landing gear goes, just run across. So they're very, very small. You'll see with the model resin how much more brittle it is than the tough resin. You can sort of snap things off a lot easier on the with the model resin because it is such a brittle plastic. All comes away nicely, and it's obviously breaking at its weakest point, which is the very tip of the touch point. So on the inside of this, we've got some slightly larger supports that we've added manually. So these are slightly larger touch points because they're having to support this whole back of, the front of the cargo bay where the pods go in. So again, we will definitely have to go around with our knife and just knock off all these little points. All the way through. They're in pairs. So they're all out. And then I'm going to take my flush cutters and I'm just going to go along the bottom here and cut them all out. We also try and put large touch points because you do need some large touch points to support a model this size in the printer. We try and put them in places that you don't actually ever see. So in this case, these ones that are sitting within here, this whole area at the bottom is covered by this plate. So we don't even need to clean these touch points up once we've cut them off because they're never actually seen. And we do spend a lot of time trying to hide these large supporting points as much as possible so that there's not as much cleanup work to do. Let's drag a lot of this out so you can start to see just how much extra touch points there are on the inside of this. They just keep going and going and going. We're going to keep going with this and just use the cutters just to cut through them all to make it easier to get them out later. Be salt shakering them out. There we go. Lovely. Okay, so we've got a few more in the garage. Yeah. Cool. Right, so we've got rid of a lot of those now. So we're really just left with this bottom lot here and the ones at the back. We'll just get rid of the bottom of those supports there. There we go. So we can now see all of these touch points that we have to deal with. So we're going to go around again with the scalpel and just cut through each touch point as we go. Now these are more important to take time with because this is a surface that we need to glue to another one. So we want to make sure that we don't ruin the surface and keep it nice and straight and flat. Right, again with this. This feels a bit laborious going around each point, but it will make it so much easier to pull off in a minute. It's one of those things that its strength comes from the multiple of all of these tiny points. Forms quite a big connection when they're all pulling together. Okay, this is all the way around. So now we've got rid of all these sort of ones that are all around the ring. All the ones that are left now, the internal ones, which we're not really as worried about leaving a nice mark.
So we can just give it a very careful twist, and there we go. That is, you can see all of those internal ones that were in there that we don't really care about how they look. So you can see all that on the inside. We're not going to see because it's going to marry up actually with this part and sit on here once we've got all that cleaned up, and all of that will be hidden. So we are always trying to hide as many of these big touch points as we can because they are required, but we don't need to see them. So there we go. So this is ready for cleanup now. So we've got those, and we've got some turrets, and we will carry on to the next video. We shall see you there, and we'll look at tidying all this up. See you then. Ta-da.